Jordan T. Bryant is a new author whose first book, Journey of the Exiled, was published on Amazon about 3 weeks ago. Jordan is an avid storyteller who has been involved with stories from books to theater to games. He is currently working on the sequel to his book with a working title, The Eye of the Guardian. So, do you want to tell me just a little bit about yourself? What got you into writing? Like, what made you want to be an author? And then tell me a little bit about your book that you wrote.
Yeah, so it's actually kind of interesting. Growing up, I was always more like English than math sort of kid. I was good at both, but I preferred the flexibility of English over math. But I never thought I was the creative writer type. All my stuff, up until a certain point was like book reports and history reports, as it is. But in, I believe it was fifth grade, I had a teacher who gave us an assignment to write a short story. I think it was for NaNoWriMo or something. I don't, it's so long ago, I don't remember if that's exactly what it was, but it was some like event or something going on that he thought it would be fun and he gave an assignment. And I absolutely like refused to do this assignment. I was a turd back then. and but basically I'm like, I'm not doing it. And he kept me in from recess and stuff to work on this. He'd sit at my desk right next to his desk at that time, and eventually just like forced me to write. And at the start of it, I hated it. In fact, I don't even remember which one, but I basically stole the plot of a video game I had been playing. But I reached up to a point in writing and mimicking this story that it's like, well, I haven't gotten any farther in the game, right? So I don't know what happens next. And at that point, I mean, I was still, I didn't want to do it. I was kind of tired of it. So I just kind of made up the ending. But making up that ending, I was like, this is actually kind of like interesting. It doesn't matter what the game's actual ending is. I get to make up what I want. And it was something he said to me as well during that process. He's like, when you write your own story, like you are the god of that world that you create. Like you can choose what happens. And that kind of stuck out to me. And it didn't really take off for me from that point. It was a few years later, I made some friends in like junior high school who also wrote. And we each had kind of our own like side projects that we were kind of looking at. I helped a friend with like I think it was like a Legend of Zelda fan fiction or something that they had been working on. And from there, my love of writing and just the world building and all of that just kind of grew. And from there, my challenge was kind of more on the technical side, which I can go into later if you want. But basically, my book that I've just published is called Journey of the Exiled. And it actually started out as a co-writing project between me and that same friend who had worked on the Legend of Zelda fan fiction. It was very like D&D inspired. I've pulled a lot of inspiration from like David Eddings' The Belgariad, typical like Lord of the Rings kind of stuff. It's kind of that high fantasy adventure. But the initial concepts of it came back in that like late junior high, early high school period. But after me and my friend had gotten into like chapter 2, and she's like, well, I'm out of ideas, and just kind of dropped the project. And so from that point, I'd write a little bit, but then I'd get stuck and put it down for a while. Then I'd pick it up, write some more. And so it kind of grew over time. I just pick it up here and there. And then I have a really good friend who I kind of bounce ideas off with. And with his help, as well as some other kind of reference books. I have one that I use called The Writer's Little Helper that really helped me understand, how stories are put together, how bestsellers kind of look and things like that. And from there, like as we developed the world, and it was so much fun to write. Most of the writing occurred probably within the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 years, within the longest period. And the first two chapters that me and my friend had worked on have been rewritten because they no longer fit with what the plot is. Um, but yeah, it's a high fantasy adventure. It's about this pair of characters, Selene and Var, and their siblings. They practice necromancy, which is kind of a taboo magic, and they're discovered, exiled from their home. So now they have to find a new place to live, as well as someone else, because they're students. They have to find someone else who can continue to teach them necromancy, because they're not going to give it up. And along the way, there are all sorts of challenges. They have a paladin chasing after them. There's untold dangers out in the woods because they kind of live at the edge of the kingdom, out in the frontier forest area. And then there's kind of at this point, kind of a side plot with larger events happening that they kind of start to discover in book one. It's planned to be, I plan for it to be a 3-book series, but there's a lot of material I have for book 3, so it may end up being 4. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to write, and I'm really excited to have it out.
That's exciting. That's a lot of work. So when you finally get it published, it's like, it's such a good feeling.
Yeah.
That's cool. And you said that you are working on the second book right now, right?
Yeah. The working title for it is The Eye of the Guardian. I don't want to give too many details because it continues off of the ending of book 1. There is a bit of a time jump. I want to say it was like 4 months later or something like that. I'd have to go back and look at the actual details. I have notes on it somewhere, but but no, it's a lot of fun to write. But yeah, I'm writing in, I think, about chapter 5 of book 2. I'm almost to chapter 6. So
What would you say were some of the biggest roadblocks or challenges that you hit when you were trying to write the novel?
that kind of goes back to the technical things that I was saying I was having challenges with earlier. When I started writing, I didn't know a lot about like the creative process. I had done some like theater. I had done some, I played like D&D since junior high school. And so I was part of interactive storytelling, but I was never the one directing or leading the group or anything. So I kind of would just start writing and go until I stopped. Like I couldn't think of anything else. I never really like planned the story beginning to end when I started it. And for me, I thought that was an advantage at the time. I thought, oh, that gives it the freedom to go wherever it's gonna go. But the problem is it all has to come from me at some point as well, right? Like if I don't know where it's going, it's gonna go nowhere. And so over time, and that was one of the things from the Writer's Little Helper. It had something called the 10 scene tool, where to help like plot out your story and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, like this is something I can work with. This is something I can do. So I ended up plotting out the rest of book 1, and then it was a lot easier because some of those I just wrote those key scenes and then filled in the gaps in between. So it wasn't entirely linear. I'd write like the end scene, then I'd write this scene from like chapter 10 or whatever, and then just kind of fill things in. But once I knew where the story was going, it was a lot easier to know how to get it there.
When you had it
pulled together and you had it in a novel format, what were your steps to get it published on KDP as far as editing goes, cover design, formatting, getting it all ready, and then actually submitting it to KDP?
So I have a really good friend from high school that did the artwork for me. But she is incredibly busy. She does all sorts of artwork. She does sketches. She does carvings. She does just all sorts of stuff. Very busy, busy, busy. And so I'd say the artwork is probably one of the longest things it took just to get a finalized piece that I could put up. And but that was more of a time thing. Like, that wasn't any issues with the art itself. That wasn't issues at my end. It was just time. She had to have the time to work on it. And, it took a lot longer than I initially expected, but I really like how the cover turned out. I actually, in high school, I had a creative writing teacher who is also a published author for a project in college, because I wanted to get somewhere in the writing industry in my career at some point. So I did an interview with him, just asking about publishing and things like that. And I won't mention names or anything, but he said he had done one book through a publishing company, and it was the worst experience publishing that he had ever had. On top of the rejections, he said that when a company did pick it up, they wanted him to change the title. They wanted to tell him what he could and couldn't have in the book. They wanted to basically take all this control of the story itself. And I'm sure it was with the intent to help. I'm sure they thought some things would work better than others. But he was like, because of that experience, I will never again publish through a publishing company. He goes through his own, he basically created an indie publishing company, and he publishes all his stuff himself now. But yeah, he said going through a publishing company was the worst. And the other thing he had mentioned of it that resonated with me is, he's like, I'm a teacher. I have a wife. I have children. And I don't need someone telling me, oh, you have to go across the country on this date to do this interview or this showing or this signing or whatever. Not that he doesn't enjoy doing an interview or a signing occasionally, but he's like, where I've published it, I have control of my schedule. If I don't want to go out and do an interview, I don't have to go out and do an interview. He said it gives me a lot more time and a lot more flexibility to be home with my family and, take care of that part of my life. He said he's friends with another better known author who got an agent, went through a traditional publisher, and he's like, he is gone all the time. And, it's great for him. It works really well for him. He loves it. But I would rather be home with my family and be able to choose when I want to do events like that.
Do you have any ideas of how you want to share your book with people?
Big thing in today's day and age, and I think a lot of people kind of understand this to some level, is social media. Social media is much bigger right now. I don't know the last time I saw an ad for a book on TV, right? Like, it's all through social media, which honestly I should have done much more earlier, because now that I have the book published, now I'm trying to build the platform and get expanded enough for people to see the posts and things like that. I should have been working to build it alongside, so I had the follower base once it released to be able to just start posting and getting out there, which I do post, but I don't have the reach yet that I would like to. So a couple things I'm trying to do some mixed media. You invited me to do this, which I love. I think this is a lot of fun. I had someone who just did kind of a low budget commercial for me. And I found him through I think the same writers group you posted. I'm part of 2 or 3, so I don't know if it was that one or if it was another one. But he reached out and kind of sent me some shots. And like I said, they're low budget. They're mostly some music, some background, some text. But it works for what I can afford right now. And for what it is, it's very well done. So I'm trying to do that because some people like to read a post, some people like to watch a video, some people like the sound, you know what I mean? People will respond to different things. Another thing that I am trying to do, but it's proving more complicated and for kind of obvious reasons, is taking advantage of influencers on various platforms, right? You know, some people may hate me for this or get irritated, what have you, but I like to watch TikToks. I think it's a fun app. Honestly, I wasn't sure of it when it started, but as it learns what you like, and more often than not, I enjoy the videos. And there's some big users on there that I feel like, one, I'd like to send the book out as a thank you, but how cool would it be to have one of those big users just give a shout out? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if I can get it into the hands of the right people, and if they enjoy it enough to bring it up, to show it to their followers, I feel like that has the potential to do a lot more than I can do myself at this moment in time. Yeah, my strategy is, as far as picking who, for the most part right now, it's people I watch that I know have larger bases, because a lot of the things I see are things like Dungeons and Dragons or theater, and it's all kind of that fantasy area that I'm like, oh well, if you like D&D, maybe you'll like my book, right? You want to get to the hands of people who will enjoy it. So I'm not going to send a copy of my high fantasy novel to someone who's into historical fiction, right? It's, you gotta know enough to know that this might be a good matchup, and then, as you mentioned, develop that relationship and try to get in that way, which is great. It can be difficult though. I've found, because, and I know it's for security purposes, but you know, you don't know when you send a message out on, for example, TikTok, and it's to someone you're not already connected with, mutual followers, whatever. It's like you can send this person 3 messages, but that's it if they don't respond, basically, right? Like you can't have like ongoing attempts at communication. And again, I know it's for like safety and security and privacy purposes and all that, but it does make that process a little more difficult at times. If you're going to self-publish, well, first off, I'd say decide that towards the beginning. Look at the options, balance it. If you're someone with the freedom and flexibility that, you know, you don't mind going away all the time or whatever, if your book gets big through a traditional publisher, what have you, find a good agent, find a good publisher, go that route. I will say they have the resources and the tools to get you a lot farther, a lot faster, at least in the beginning, than self-publishing does. But self-publishing has its advantages too. I've noticed through KDP, we as authors get a larger percentage of the sale than you do through a traditional publisher. But that's only really beneficial if you make the number of sales, right? Like, so decide that at the beginning, or towards the beginning, because then if you do decide to self-publish, you can start to build the base at the same time you're building the book, right? You can discuss, oh, like, check out this character I'm developing for my book. You can start to gain that following and get people who are interested before the book even comes out. You know, I have some family and friends who were pre-readers or who were interested before it came out, but that only gets me so far. If you can build that social media following, where once you publish it, you can just start posting, hey, it's out, and you can start getting the sales, that'd be beneficial. And if you don't know how, there's so many people out there, so many connections that people have. There's probably someone you know, or someone who knows someone you know, that does know how to do it. I will say one thing that has really helped me is I'm a student at UVU studying business entrepreneurship. So I'm studying how to start up my own business. And a lot of those tools and a lot of those skills also apply when you're trying to get a book out. And it's not all the same, but there's a lot of really good information there. I don't necessarily, if it's not your cup of tea, I don't necessarily recommend going out to get a whole degree for it if you don't want to. But, you know, every once in a while, I've seen entrepreneurs give a lecture or something somewhere, or do some sort of workshop or something. If you're going to self-publish, knowing marketing tips and tricks can be a really big advantage as well. Because honestly, I mean, don't get me wrong, I have a massive passion for my story. I'm going to write these books whether people buy them or not, right? But how much better is it when people do? So the end goal, regardless of my passion for it, is I want to sell it. I want to get it out there. So, you know, that's knowing some skills to do that can never be a bad thing. One thing that was interesting is as I wrote, I found more and more people I was connected to at some level that also write, or they were thinking of writing a story, or they started to write one but couldn't figure it out. And I kind of started to realize, especially with self-publishing, you know, publishers, they go through editors, they go through copywriters, they do all this stuff to quality control before it goes out. But self-publishing doesn't have a lot of that at this stage. And what it does have can be extremely expensive. My book is, I want to say, around 98,000 words. I'd have to go back and look at the file to get the exact word count. But for a book of that length, it can cost up to like $1,500 to get it edited. And that blew my mind. I was expecting to have to pay, right? But I thought, oh, maybe 200, 250, you know, something like that. And maybe that's low. I really didn't have any idea at the time, but I was not expecting it to be that expensive. And I don't claim to be a professional editor. I didn't go to school for editing. Like I said, I went for business. But having the writing skills and the developing skills that I have, as I mentioned, I do D&D. And since high school, I have run my own campaigns, build my own worlds with stuff like that and stuff. Really great developing practice to do stuff like that for those that are interested. But one thing I've started to do, and I'm starting to try to build this business, I have a couple people I work with already, but I'm starting a business I call Consultation. I'm doing a couple things that I'm really trying to do to help people who are interested or who are at any process to kind of help make sure, you know, their ideas are developed, or, you know, whatever they have stuck with, they can get assistance for. And I just kind of the same thing my friend did for me, and he's actually working on this project with me. But just kind of a springboard for ideas. You know, they'll tell us kind of what they're thinking. We'll help them develop it. We can help from a conceptual stage if they've already written a few chapters. Heck, we can help if they already have a rough draft but aren't exactly happy with how it went. And so I feel like with that, I can try to help those who are interested have kind of a level of quality control for their work. Like I said, I don't claim to be a professional editor. I'm probably not going to catch every spelling mistake you make or every grammatical mistake. But from an actual story building perspective, your plot, your characters, you know, what else you have, I feel like having that can be a great advantage, because I can't tell you how many people I had pre-read my book, and I'd be like, okay, I'll let you read what I've got, but I want some feedback. And I legitimately did. I wanted feedback. I want to know what's coming off well. I want to know what needs work. And I can't tell you how many, be it friends, family, they hand it back to me and go, oh, it's good. Right? Like, that doesn't help me. I appreciate that you like the story. Like, it does make me feel good that you like the story, but that doesn't help me build or improve my writing skills or my storytelling skills. But I found the more I talked to other writers and we had this kind of shared experience with it, it was kind of like, well, I write, I have some different background in it than you do. I actually work a lot with the characters and plot development. My friend that helps me with this project that I kind of bounce ideas off with, he does some of that too, but he's a really big history buff. So if you're writing something like historical fiction, or just want to know how, if you're basing off a time period and want to know how the kingdoms would be run at that time, or the military or something, he has that kind of knowledge. And so like I said, I have a few people I'm working with that really appreciate it, because a lot of times it's more feedback than they can get from anyone else. And I do try to keep it affordable. I do one session free, just to kind of get to know the story, get to know the author, kind of get to know where they want to go with it. And then I do like $40 for a 1 hour session thereafter. And I do it that way. It seems kind of high per session, but the one thing I don't want to do is royalties. Authors already get such a relatively low percentage off the sales of their book. I don't want to keep taking from that. So I figure 40 is enough to keep the company going, keep me being able to do this while not perpetually taking money from the people I'm assisting.